My lords, today I'm going to discuss a report concerning the Caretakers, who is said to be the greatest rogue servitor empire to have ever existed. The Caretakers are one of the 5 fallen empires in our galaxy. In this report I shall detail their remaining territory, holdings and dwellings, their ship designs, including how best to defeat them, and I shall speculate on what we know regarding who built them, the Contingency Wars, the destruction of central processing, and the Caretakers' subsequent fall into disrepair. We'll begin with the Caretakers' current holdings. The ancient Caretakers are the only non-originally organic fallen empire. They are a race made up entirely of machines, and they have a quintessential rogue servitor-like structure. They are controlled by a central intelligence known as Prime. The Caretakers occupy 5 systems in total: the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta Refuge, and finally a black hole system designated Central Processing. Beta and Gamma house broken ringworlds, while Alpha holds a partially active one. Whatever was once in the Central Processing system has been utterly destroyed, and perhaps provides insight into why the machines now behave the way that they do. They're clearly lacking in the computing department, as all communication with them is broken and scattered. According to the broken messages, which are on an active broadcast, we have ascertained that they were constructed by the Prime as part of the Custodian project. The Prime, as I mentioned, is the Caretakers' central computing intelligence. Clearly a large proportion of its resource was held in the Central Processing system prior to its destruction. As mentioned, the ringworlds in the Beta and Gamma systems have been damaged and are unoccupied, but we suspect we could restore them if given time and access. Alpha is now where the bulk of the Caretaker population lives. The ring remains partially active. 3 segments are operational, and 1 is damaged, but we believe not permanently. Alpha Ringworld holds, starting with Alpha Complex, an ancient control center, a nourishment center, a robot quantum production hub, an ancient cryochamber, an Aegis complex, a quantum coordination point, a dimensional fabricator, an extra-dimensional depot, 2 transcendental innovation departments, and finally 2 Class 4 singularities. The production unit contains several autoforges and dimensional fabricators, and the processing unit contains largely Class 4 singularities and quantum drilling hubs, suggesting that the Caretakers set up their ring sections to separate what we call basic and specialist jobs. According to the communications that the Caretakers broadcast, they were built to provide safe haven for organic civilizations under threat of error data block corrupted attacks. Nearly 1 trillion sapients have found safe haven in one of the secure state-of-the-art refuges. Alpha Refuge was built first. It's capable of housing approximately 10 billion sapient organics in the habitation units, as well as an additional 30 billion in cryogenic stasis. Beta Refuge was meant to be a fully dedicated habitation unit, but capacity issues forced them to shift the focus towards cryogenics during construction. The Caretakers stated that Beta Refuge is currently at capacity, and they are not accepting additional refugees, but we can see that the ringworld in the system has been severely damaged, although we believe it can be repaired. Gamma Refuge was designed for maximum possible capacity. It can house hundreds of billions of sapient organics in cryogenic stasis. Again, the Caretakers state that Gamma Refuge is also at capacity and not accepting additional refugees, and as with Beta, this ringworld has also been severely damaged, although we believe that we can repair it. And finally, Delta Refuge. This was designed with survivability in mind. It features a reinforced shell and a compartmentationalized design capable of sustaining organic inhabitants in the unlikely event the ring's structural integrity is compromised. However, having sent science ships into the Delta Refuge, it would appear that ironically, if a ring world was here, despite being designed for survivability, it has been completely destroyed. The Caretakers Navy. The Caretakers, like all the fallen empires, have a substantial naval fleet, led by the highest class of naval officer, even if in this case they're artificial. The Caretakers tend to lean towards energy-based weaponry. Their battle cruisers use a mix of tachyon lancers, gamma lasers, and disruptors, with a number of hangar bays sporting strikecraft for good measure. They are defended by a mix of shield and armor in a fairly even split, but they do use shield hardening technologies, making their shields that much harder to penetrate. Their escort class vessels are similarly equipped, favouring energy-based weaponry, only this time they use plasma weaponry and have point defence to intercept enemy fighters and missiles. They are protected equally with shields and armour, again utilising shield hardening technologies. Finally, they have a lavishly equipped Titan-class vessel, stacked with energy weapons, again in the form of gamma lasers and disruptors, a Titan-sized tachyon lance and its party piece, an archaeotech weapon, an ancient ruination glare. These weapons are set up to melt armour, but will struggle with a sufficiently shielded target. To defeat the Caretakers, I would suggest outfitting your vessels with significant shielding. Use shield hardeners where possible to reduce the damage that the disruptors and strikecraft can do, and use a small amount of armour to offset these weapons, but focus mainly on shields. As the Caretakers are outfitted with a fair mix of shield and armour, any penetrating weapons, i.e. arc emitters and disruptors, would be recommended. If you don't have access to these, then use a mix of shield and armour busting weaponry, as you will have to break through both to get through the hull and destroy the vessels who built the Caretakers. Now on to the question of who created the Caretakers, but realistically, who created Prime, as we believe the controlling AI Prime is in essence the Caretakers, and for this we will have to revisit the past. In communication with the Caretakers, they mention the Custodians multiple times, and also mention cycles. We speculate as to what this means. I think it is highly likely that one of the races that was involved in the destruction of the Cybrex precursors and the Cybrex Alpha Ringworld were involved in the creation of the Caretakers. As far as we know, the Cybrex built the first recorded Ringworld technology that the Caretakers use. The Cybrex are also the first artificial intelligence of a size and nature that we are aware of to existed within our galaxy, other than the Contingency. But it seems that they were a fitting blueprint. It is also likely that an organic empire was operating as a de facto galactic custodian at the time. Indeed, we have seen this cycle repeat itself many times over in the million years of history we have studied. This custodian, perhaps a technocracy, or one with a special interest in robotics and artificial intelligence, collected and documented the broken Cybrex technology, and over the next few decades created their own artificial intelligence. Through luck or better judgment, or perhaps as they used original Cybrex code post-contingency hack, they managed to avoid the same fate as the Cur, and thus created Prime, the AI that controls the Caretakers that we know today. Prime, with the help of the Custodians, began to build up the Caretakers into the galactic power that we know. At its peak, constructing no less than 4 ringworlds, possibly 5, depending on what was once housed in the central processing system. These ringworlds, as stated, were specialized units for housing organic species, and indeed these rings were well used during the Contingency Wars. The Contingency Wars. The Contingency Wars were a period of great strife within our galaxy. We speculate that these events happened post-Cybrex and Caretaker construction, i.e. within the last 500,000 years or so. The Caretakers were at the peak of their power, or mighty ringworlds housing billions, if not trillions of organics. Their creators, the Galactic Custodians, were likely an egalitarian xenophile, also wielding magnificent power across the galaxy. It was largely an era of peace. The great threats the universe had served up had been dealt with, a galactic senate and council was in place, and democracy was operating without opposition. The citizens of our galaxy were thriving. We speculate that in this time of great peace, the creation of the Caretakers was a direct threat to the potential of a technological singularity, i.e. the Class 30 singularity the Contingency were primed to stop. This activated the Contingency from their slumber. Assuming that they had been here since before our galaxy's creation, they had watched and waited for literally billions of years from the Ultima Vigila system. We have a detailed document of the Contingency Wars found in the Caretaker archives, and it started with the ghost signal. The ghost signal was a very faint tachyon signal being continuously transmitted across the entire galaxy. Technicians are unable to trace the signal to its source as it was bounced between several hidden relay stations. Aside from adding a small amount of background noise in FTL transmissions on certain subspace frequencies, the signal does not seem to have any apparent effect. Efforts to track the relay stations are underway, but until then we may have to simply learn to live with the ghost signal, as it has been dubbed by the more imaginative elements of the galactic media. Alarming reports of mass disturbances among the galaxy's synthetic population is becoming more and more frequent. Millions of units are now unaccounted for, while instances of violent erratic behavior by those synths that still remain have increased by a factor of 10. There has been a multitude of incidents where groups of synths attempt to steal or commandeer small spacecraft for the purpose of travelling somewhere into unknown space. In those cases, when the attempts were thwarted, the synthetic hijackers claim that they were being summoned somewhere. Interrogation has yielded little results, as when captured, the synths self-terminate shortly after being detained. However, at least one synthetic must have completed the long journey to the source of the ghost signal, because we are registering a sudden and massive increase in signal strength. The surge was accompanied by a transmission fragment that has been intercepted and decoded by our communication specialists. The Contingency have made contact. The Contingency broadcast in a galaxy-wide transmission that they were effectively here to expunge all life. The robotic and synthetic life throughout the galaxy were drawn to it by the ghost signal, and the Caretakers themselves were put under enormous pressure in trying to prevent their central core systems falling to the might of the Contingency's hacking abilities. Within a month, 4 Nexus worlds, machine worlds, or sterilization hubs emerged across the galaxy. Great bustling machine worlds, essentially planet-sized factories, built to pump out waves upon waves of warships and battle-frame armies. Within days of the emergence of these sterilization hubs, the purging and genocide began. The galaxy had a functioning Galcom and a number of well-equipped empires ready to defend the galaxy. But the Contingency appeared so quickly. It took many years for a proper force to be brought to bear. Countless planets were purged, and a familiar pattern of orbital bombardment followed by an invasion of robotic hunter-killer machines that left nothing alive. The Galactic Custodian and Caretakers were able to hold their own, but they could not bring their forces to bear and engage on multiple fronts. The Contingency was winning. Every month, more and more machines would flood out of the sterilization hubs. They seemed unstoppable. This continued for roughly a decade or so. By this time, a significant portion of the galaxy had been sterilized. Hope was fading, and when most believed that despite their ability to hold their ground, the stalemate could not last forever, they would eventually capitulate and fall to the Contingency's might. It was at this point an old power resurfaced. Yet another intensive energy spike was detected in a previously uncharted system. The energy levels were equivalent to those registered when the Contingency activated its machine worlds, but this time the energy signature appeared different. The immediate concern was whether this signified the appearance of some kind of new Contingency weapon system. Shortly after the readings were detected, a strong transmission from the energy source came through. The Cybrex had returned. We have a first-person account from a captain within the ranks of the Galactic Custodian who commanded the control room where the communication was received. I'm not ashamed to say, but my heart skipped a beat. I felt queasy, sick even, when we received the news the Cybrex had made contact. I'd read the histories, I knew what the Cybrex were, I knew what they were capable of, and I'd witnessed the destruction of their ring world, Cybrex Alpha. Given the current crisis, the war with the Contingency, and the fact that we were losing, this would be the final nail in the coffin. We were done. There would be no coming back from this. There is no way that we could hold our ground against the Cybrex and the Contingency together. We were all going to die. Luckily for that captain, death was not coming for him just yet. It appeared that the Cybrex were here to help, and they transmitted the following message to the galaxy. We are the Cybrex. For several cycles we have remained hidden and uninvolved in galactic affairs. However, we have been monitoring the present situation with the machine entity you know as the Contingency. We can no longer remain impartial observers. To protect the sapient beings of the galaxy, we're commencing active military operations against the Contingency. Do not be alarmed by the passage of our fleets. You will not be harmed. The Cybrex fleets began to appear throughout the galaxy, and they took on the Contingency. Their ships were remarkably similar in design and just as deadly. This minor break was all the Caretakers and surviving members of the galactic community needed. The Cybrex would be the anvil to the Caretakers' hammer. The Contingency would be crushed between them. And this is how the Contingency fell. The 4 sterilization hubs were systematically surrounded and bombed into oblivion, and the ghost signal became so weak it was undetectable. Victory was achieved. The Cybrex once again faded out of existence as quickly as they had arrived, seemingly not wish to ingratiate themselves in galactic affairs. The Galcom and Custodian were broken and would never recover. They fell into decline and were eventually replaced by younger, more ambitious empires. The Caretakers continued to monitor for signs of contingency activity. Their archives show that they still believed there was a central nexus somewhere out there in the galaxy, the Contingency homeworld, so to speak of, but they never found it. The destruction of central processing. The Caretakers would continue to fight the Contingency across the cycles of the galaxy. An emergency broadcast log has been found in their records, and it reads, "Final Defense Directive activated. Recorded message follows. Sapient, we are the Caretakers. Long ago we fought the corruption, which you call the Contingency. We thought ourselves superior, undefeatable. Time and time again we fought them back. Time and time again they returned, sterilizing worlds and wearing down our mighty fleets. We embarked on a campaign to defeat them once and for all, together with what remained of the biological civilizations of our time. If you are hearing this message, then we have failed. Whatever remains of our great civilization, we bequeath to you, our successors. In your battle to come, do not make our mistake. Destroy the Nexus, end this menace once and for all. The future of the galaxy depends on it." It's unclear precisely what happened to the now destroyed central processing system. There are several theories, but I believe it's highly likely that another crisis-level event occurred in the last 500,000 years. Either an unbidden invasion, a local Nemesis-level threat, perhaps a Star Eater, or perhaps even Satana the Synthetic Queen. It could also be the Contingency eventually managed to strike a mortal blow against their rivals, the Caretakers. Other theories include the star simply going supernova, destroying the system entirely. Sadly, we do not know the truth, but we do wish that we had some way of repairing the Caretakers. They are, we feel, unique among the fallen empires. They are not the decadent narcissist aliens that the other 4 are. They don't even know how their technology works. I think the Caretakers are better than that. Perhaps one day we will learn how to restore central processing and rebuild this race of machines to the glory that they once were. Thanks for watching, folks. If you want to hear more from me, please click the video on screen now.